After graduation, I stood in the rain with one suitcase, the one my father shoved at me before driving off without looking back. 15 years later, I sat in the boardroom of Ironvale Systems, his company. I signed the termination order firing him for cause. People weren't stunned by the firing. They were stunned by how I bought the company. That old suitcase didn't just hold a graduation gown. It held the one key my father never saw coming. My name is Tessa Whitmore. I am 33 years old. The day I graduated from North Point University, the sky opened up. It wasn't a symbolic sprinkle. It was a cold, driving, angry rain. It hammered the white commencement tent, and the sound of the valedictorian's speech was lost to the noise and the wind. On the quad, the grass turned to mud, soaking the hems of gowns. But nobody seemed to care. All around me, there was a sea of joy. Families huddled under umbrellas, cameras flashing, laughter cutting through the downpour. People were hugging, crying tears of relief, their futures bright and waiting. My own degree, the one I had worked nights and weekends for, felt heavy in its leather folder. Industrial Systems Engineering, summa cum laude. It had taken me longer than the fresh-faced 22-year-olds, but I had finished at the absolute top of my class. I stood alone near the curb, the hood of my gown plastered to my hair, scanning the long line of dark, expensive cars. He was late. Finally, a black sedan sliced through the rain and pulled up, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. It was Graham Whitmore's car. My father. He didn't even park, just idled by the curb, the engine a low, impatient rumble. He stepped out, shielded by the architecture building's awning. He was perfectly, impossibly dry. His suit was crisp, his shoes shined. Graham Whitmore, founder and CEO of Ironvale Systems, a man who saw the world as a series of inputs and outputs, and who treated emotion as a rounding error. "Dad," I said, my voice tight. I tried to smile. "You came." He didn't move to hug me. He didn't congratulate me. His eyes were flat, assessing. "Tessa, you got it. Then?" "I got it," I confirmed. He nodded once, as if ticking a box on a purchase order. He turned, opened the trunk, and pulled out a suitcase. It was an old, battered thing, a charcoal gray hardshell with scuffed corners and one wobbly wheel. He shoved it at me, and I grabbed the cold plastic handle. "What is this?" I asked. "I didn't pack." "You're an adult now," he announced, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You're 33. You're officially educated. The support ends today." The rain turned to ice on my skin. "What are you talking about? The apartment?" "The lease is up at the end of the month. I've already informed the landlord you won't be renewing. The car insurance is canceled effective at midnight." He said it all as if he were discussing quarterly projections. "It's time you learned some discipline, real-world consequences. This is how you'll grow." My breath hitched. I could feel the stares of other families. The rain was my only shield. "The internship," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "You promised. You said when I finished my degree, there was a place for me at Ironvale. You said you needed a systems engineer." That was the deal. The entire motivation that had pushed me through 15-hour study days and graveyard shifts at the campus library. Get the degree. Tessa, learn the theory. Then come learn the business. Graham looked at me, his gaze clear and sharp. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something, but it was just the reflection of the rain. "That," he said, "is no longer suitable." The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. No longer suitable? For who? For the company? Or for you? He didn't answer. He simply got back into his sedan. The door closed with a heavy, expensive, vacuum-sealed sound, shutting me out completely. I stood there, paralyzed, clutching the handle of the suitcase. The car pulled away from the curb. I watched the twin red taillights glow in the gray afternoon. Reflecting on the pooling water, I watched them get smaller and smaller, until they turned the corner and vanished. That image, the retreating red lights on the wet pavement, was seared into my mind. It was the moment my life ended, and the moment it began. My entire world had just been reduced to what I was wearing in this one ugly suitcase. I pulled it under the awning, my hands shaking so hard I could barely work the latches. They snapped open. Inside, it was almost empty. There was my graduation gown, the one I had just taken off, already folded. My commemorative graduation program, with my name printed in black ink. And one other thing. A single, thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a dab of wax. There was no name on it, just 2 words, written in my father's sharp, impatient hand. For later. I sank onto the suitcase, the noise of the celebration fading to a dull roar. I wouldn't cry. I would not let him have that. I swallowed the lump in my throat, the metallic taste of panic and rain. I had nowhere to go. My apartment was no longer mine. My car was no longer mine. I dragged the rattling suitcase 3 miles in the downpour to the Greyhound bus station. I bought a one-way ticket to Riverton, the closest industrial hub that was far enough away. I sat on the hard plastic seat, the bus smelling of diesel fumes and damp wool, and I took out my phone. One last try. I called Evelyn Frost, my stepmother, the woman who held the title of chairman of the board at Ironvale, but had never worked a day in the factory. It rang twice and went straight to her breezy, professional voicemail. "You've reached Evelyn. I'm dreadfully busy. Leave your thoughts." I hung up. I sent a text to my half-brother, Aiden, the golden child, the one who had been given a vice president title at 24. "Aiden, Dad just abandoned me at graduation. He cut me off. I have nothing. Please, I don't know what to do." I watched the screen. The message status changed. Delivered. Then, the 2 blue check marks appeared. Read. I waited. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes as the bus rumbled onto the highway. The typing bubble never appeared. The silence was his answer. I arrived in Riverton with $94 in a suitcase. I found a room for rent by the week, above a bar that played loud music until 2 in the morning. The lock on the door was flimsy. I needed work, not a career, a job. The next day, I walked into the hiring office at Red Crest Logistics, a sprawling, 24-hour warehouse complex. The shift manager, a tired-looking woman named Maya, looked at my resume, summa cum laude, industrial systems engineering, and then looked at me. "This is a temp job, sweetheart," she said. "We need people to pick, pack, and lift. You're overqualified." "I'm a fast learner," I said, "and I can lift 50 pounds. I started that night. My first night alone in that new room. The sound of shattering glass from the bar downstairs woke me up. I sat up, my heart pounding, and I saw the suitcase. It was time. Later was here. I pulled the envelope from the suitcase. I held it in my hands. It was heavy. I slid my thumbnail under the wax seal, ready to break it, ready to face whatever final cruel comment he had written. I stopped. My hand was shaking. I was hanging on by the thinnest thread. I had a job. I had a room. It was pathetic, but it was mine. I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I opened this letter, the contents would destroy me. It was the final blow, and I wasn't strong enough to take it. Not yet. I couldn't destroy it, but I couldn't open it. I found a roll of duct tape I'd bought to patch a leak in the ceiling. I opened the suitcase and pulled back the cheap fabric lining, exposing the plastic shell. I pressed the envelope flat against the inside. Then I taped it. I sealed it into the very structure of the suitcase, layer after layer, until it was completely hidden. It wasn't a letter anymore. It was a talisman, a dark promise. I made a vow to myself in that room. I would not open it until I was strong enough to read it and survive. I had to build a life, a fortress around myself, so that when I finally read his words, they would have no power to hurt me. As I smoothed down the last piece of tape, my phone buzzed on the floor. It was a text message. From him. My heart leaped with a stupid, desperate hope. He was checking on me. He was sorry. I opened the message. 3 words. Do not rely. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't advice. It was a command. A final severance. The knife twisted. I looked at the phone, at those 3 words, and the fear I'd been choking on for 24 hours finally solidified. It turned from terror into something hard, cold, and clean. He was right. I would not rely. But I would do more than survive. I would reclaim. I stood up. My shift at the warehouse started in an hour. I looked at the suitcase. His final insult. I took a damp cloth and wiped the rain and mud from the charcoal gray shell. I found the blank, plastic luggage tag attached to the handle. I took a permanent marker from my backpack. I uncapped it. The click echoed in the small room. I wrote my name, Tessa Whitmore. It wasn't just a tag. It was a declaration. It was an oath. He thought he'd left me with nothing but baggage. He had no idea he'd given me a weapon. Red Crest Logistics was a universe of noise, the constant, high-pitched whine of the forklifts in reverse, the percussive crash of tailgate doors, the hydraulic sigh of the pallet jacks, and over it all, the endless rumble of the conveyor belts. It was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation that smelled of diesel, dust, and shrink wrap. I was assigned to inbound, night shift. My life, which had been governed by academic calendars and theoretical models, was now ruled by a punch clock. The work was brutal, simple, and honest. My hands, which had been soft from typing, were raw and calloused by the end of the first week. I learned the new vocabulary. I wasn't lifting boxes. I was processing SKUs. I wasn't stocking shelves. I was executing put-away protocols. I learned to use the RF scanner, my new weapon, beeping at each barcode, confirming each count, my movements becoming robotic. Lift, scan, turn, place, 10 hours a night, 5 nights a week. But you cannot turn off an engineer's brain. Even while my body ached, my mind was mapping. I saw the flow, I saw the friction, and I saw the bottleneck. It was on line 4, our main artery for mixed goods processing. The system would stutter. A picker would scan an item, and the system would direct them to a pallet location that was 20 yards away, instead of the one that was 5 feet away. Then, the conveyor would halt, waiting for the picker to return, creating a cascade failure down the line. I started watching it, timing the microstops with the stopwatch on my cheap digital watch. I did the math on my break, scribbling on a napkin. They were losing productivity. It was small, but it was constant. Over a 10-hour shift, it added up. I calculated it. A loss of nearly 4%. In a business built on razor-thin margins, 4% was a hemorrhage. The problem wasn't the hardware. It was the slotting. The algorithm placing the high-volume goods was flawed. It was prioritizing the wrong metrics. I spent 2 nights in my tiny room, fueled by bad coffee, sketching out a new slotting schematic on graph paper. It wasn't revolutionary. It was just logical. It prioritized retrieval speed over simple capacity. I waited until 3 in the morning, when the shift lull hit, and approached Maya Calder. She was in her glass-walled office, rubbing her temples, a mountain of manifests on her desk. She looked up as I knocked, my graph paper in my hand. "What's up, Whitmore?" she said, her voice gravelly from fatigue. "Line 6 down again?" "No, line 4, I said, my voice sounding too academic, too clean for this environment. "It's not down, it's just slow. I think I know why." I laid the paper on her desk. She stared at it. I explained the 4% loss, the flawed pallet allocation. She leaned back, crossing her arms, her eyes narrowing. She looked from the paper to me. "You got all this from scanning boxes?" "I've been timing the stops," I said. "The system is sending pickers on inefficient routes. If we reslot the high-velocity SKUs to these primary locations, we can cut retrieval time." She was silent for a full minute. I could hear the rumble of the warehouse outside her door. She was a lifer. She had seen 100 temps come and go, most of whom couldn't be trusted to count to 10. "This is theoretical," she said. "It is," I admitted, "but it's sound." She picked up her radio. "Nate, shut down line 2 for 30 minutes. I'm running a test." She looked at me. "Line 2 is yours. College girl, Make it work. My heart hammered. Line 2 was secondary, used for overflow, but it was live. We spent the next half hour with 2 forklift drivers and a stunned-looking picker, physically moving and reslotting the pallets according to my schematic. Then Maya turned it on. We ran a batch of 100 mixed orders. I watched the picker. His movements were smoother. Scan, turn, pick, place, no hesitation, no long walks. The conveyor never stopped. We ran the numbers. The old schematic averaged 45 seconds per item. My schematic averaged 40. We ran it again. The numbers held. Maya did the math on her calculator. "That's not 4%, she said, looking at the number. "That's an 11% productivity gain." She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. "You start at 7 tomorrow, day shift. You're with me." The next day, she sat me at a spare desk with a decade-old computer. "I can't implement this mess," she said, tapping my graph paper. "We need a standard operating procedure, an SOP. Write it, make it clean, make it simple enough for a guy who's been here 2 weeks to understand." I spent the next 2 days writing. It felt good. I stripped out the academic jargon. I used simple commands. I made flowcharts. It was practical. It was clean. And it was as elegant as a circuit board. When I was done, I handed her the file. She read it, printed it, and put it in a binder. "This is good. Whitmore," she said. It was the highest praise I'd ever received. She moved me off the floor and onto operations, swapping my night shifts for brutal early mornings. I started working with the drivers, trying to optimize the inbound receiving schedule. That's where I met Nate, the driver Maya had called on the radio. He was in his late 50s, with a quiet wisdom and a deep knowledge of the roads. I was trying to build a routing algorithm based on shortest distance and highway speed limits. He laughed at it. "You're thinking like a computer. Kid," he said, sipping coffee from a stained thermos. "You're planning for an empty road. The road's never empty. The empty road isn't the good road. The right road is the good road. The right road knows about the 9:05 a.m. shift change at the textile plant, and it knows the bridge on Route 12 freezes before the signs tell you it does." He taught me the human element, the data that computers missed. He taught me to see the unseen patterns. I was learning. I was building something. I was exhausted. But for the first time in my life, I felt competent. I had a purpose that I had carved out for myself. And then, one Tuesday, I saw it. Maya had sent me to receiving to troubleshoot a new batch of scanners. I was walking down the main artery, line 4, the very line I had fixed. I was tracing a power conduit when my eyes landed on the manufacturer's plate, riveted to the main chassis of the conveyor system itself. A dark blue, metal plate, with a familiar, stylized logo. Iron Veil Systems. I froze. The noise of the warehouse faded. I could feel the blood drain from my face. It was his. This whole place. The belts I analyzed, the rollers I optimized, the system that was the lifeblood of this entire building, it was all built by my father. I had run away, only to land directly in his shadow. The air felt thick. I felt the sudden, irrational urge to run, to quit, to get as far away from that nameplate as possible. I leaned against a support beam, my stomach churning. I had fixed his system. I took a breath, and another. I closed my eyes. Do not rely. My father's words came back to me. Fine, I wouldn't rely, but I wouldn't run, either. This was just metal. This was just a machine. It didn't own me. He didn't own me. I turned my back on the nameplate and walked away. I didn't tell Maya. I didn't tell anyone. I compartmentalized. I treated Iron Veil Systems as just another vendor, a ghost in the machine. My focus became ferocious. I devoured work. Maya noticed. "You're smart, Whitmore," she told me one evening. "Smarter than this desk. But you're all raw talent. You need polish. You need credentials." She slid a brochure across the desk. Lean Six Sigma, it's a certification, process improvement methodology. Red Crest will sponsor you. We'll pay for the classes. I looked at the brochure. It was a path up. It was a real step. But the idea of being sponsored, of being indebted to Redcrest, made my skin crawl. It felt too much like my father's apartment, his car insurance, a gift that could be taken away. I appreciate it, Maya, I said, sliding it back, but I'll handle it myself. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. That night, I researched local grants. I found a small, local community fund for women in STEM careers. I applied. I used my North Point grades, and as a project sample, I submitted my SOP for Line 4. 2 weeks later, I got a letter. I had a full scholarship for the night school certification course. My new routine was grueling. I worked from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Redcrest, then took a bus to the community college for a 3-hour class. Twice a week. I'd get home just before 9 p.m., my brain buzzing with statistics and logistics models. And every Tuesday and Thursday, I packed my bag. I'd put my textbook, my notebooks, and my laptop into that old charcoal gray suitcase. The wobbly wheel drove me crazy, but it was the only bag I had. Taped inside the lining, the cream-colored envelope, for later, was a silent passenger. I could feel its weight, its presence. Even though it was just paper, it was my ballast. I was in the middle of a class on Kaizen, continuous improvement, when the call came. It was Maya. "Get here, now," she said. The whole grid just went dark. A transformer had blown somewhere in the industrial park. The entire Redcrest facility was dead. No lights, no scanners, no conveyors, and a dozen trucks, full of temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals, were waiting at the docks, their refrigeration units running on diesel, but their manifests locked in the dead system. I arrived to find total chaos. Maya was yelling into a radio, her face pale in the red glow of the emergency lights. "We can't receive them," she was saying. "We have no way to log the inventory. If we accept them blind, we'll lose the whole shipment." "We can do it manually," I said, grabbing a stack of clipboards from the office. "Manually?" she snapped. "We have 20,000 units. Whitmore, we don't even know what's on those trucks. The manifests are digital." "The drivers have paper bills of lading," I insisted. "It's law. Get the balls. We'll build a manual intake system, right here." My degree, the theory I thought was useless, kicked in. This wasn't a technical problem. It was a systems problem. For the next 6 hours, I didn't think, I acted. I turned the main receiving dock into a flowchart. I set up 3 tables with lanterns. Table 1, BOL verification. Table 2, manual count and tagging. Table 3, pallet assignment. I used runners, forklift drivers on foot, to move manifests between stations. I used a whiteboard and a marker to track every pallet that came off those trucks. It was slow, it was messy, but it worked. When the power flickered back on at 4 a.m, 12 trucks had been successfully offloaded, logged, and moved into the climate-controlled zone. Not a single case was lost. The sun was coming up when Maya found me, slumped against a pallet of tagged boxes, covered in ink and sweat. She handed me a new ID badge. It wasn't the orange temp badge. It was blue. "Report to Human Resources," she said, her voice rough with exhaustion. "You're a trainee process engineer. We're creating the position. Welcome to salary." It was the first time I signed my full name in a professional capacity. I was reviewing the SOP I had written for the manual intake, making it official. At the bottom of the form was a line, "Approved by." I picked up the pen, T. Whitmore. I stared at it, the name that had been a brand of failure, the name I had been so desperate to escape. It looked different now. It wasn't his name. It was my name. It was a burden. Yes, but it was also a benchmark. It was the engine. I was T. Whitmore, the person who had saved the shipment. A few weeks later, Maya and I were sharing a late lunch in the break room. She was scrolling through an industry newsfeed on her phone. "Well, that's trouble," she muttered. "What's that?" "Iron Veil," she said. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face neutral, sipping my coffee. "Looks like they're about to lose the entire Omnicorp account. one of their biggest customers. I tried to sound casual. Oh yeah? Bad service? Worse, Maya said, tapping the screen. Bad tech. Their control software is ancient. It doesn't integrate with new automated picking systems. Omnicorp is threatening to rip it all out and go with a competitor if they can't update the firmware. And the rumor is, Ironvale can't. Their whole system is too old to patch. I watched her scroll, but I wasn't seeing the phone. I was seeing a map, a gap. My father built fortresses. Ironvale was his fortress, built on old, heavy, reliable, and now obsolete technology. Everyone, like Omnicorp, was attacking the fortress walls, demanding he change. That night, I sat in my room. I pulled my notebook from the suitcase. I looked at the new, clean ID badge hanging on my wall. T. Whitmore, process engineer. I opened the notebook to a fresh page. I thought about Nate's advice. The empty road isn't the good road. The right road is the good road. I thought about the Ironvale nameplate on the side of the conveyor. I thought about the faulty software. Attacking the walls was stupid. My father would fight. He would entrench. But a fortress needs supply lines. It needs water. I wrote one sentence in my notebook. Don't attack their fortress. Buy the water line. I closed the book. I put it back in the suitcase. As I did, my fingers brushed against the fabric lining, over the spot where the envelope was taped. I felt the sharp, defined edge of it. The urge to open it, to finally know, was stronger than it had ever been. I wanted to see if the man who wrote that letter recognized the woman I was becoming. I pressed my hand flat against the spot, pushing the envelope down, securing the tape. Not yet. It wasn't time. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building, and I was still too close to the blast. I left Redcrest Logistics 2 years after saving the pharmaceutical shipment. I had a title, a decent salary, and my Six Sigma black belt. I had credibility, but I was still servicing another person's system. The rumor Maya had heard about Ironvale and Omnicorp had proven true. Omnicorp had ripped out the Ironvale system and replaced it with a German competitor, a move that sent a shockwave through the regional logistics world. The fortress was showing cracks. It was time to build the water line. I incorporated Northline Labs. The name was a quiet nod to North Point University, the place I'd been exiled from. I filed the paperwork myself, listing the address as my new, slightly better apartment. The company's mission, on paper, was to create lightweight, affordable AI-driven coordination software for small and medium-sized warehouses, the ones who couldn't afford the massive German systems, the ones who were still running on old Ironvale hardware. My first move was to secure seed funding. I didn't go to venture capitalists. They wanted fast growth, loud press releases, and a charismatic founder. I wanted quiet, strategic partners who understood the grunt work. I targeted a small group of logistics angels, mostly former trucking fleet owners and warehouse managers who had cashed out. I prepared a 20-page pitch deck. It was all data, no fluff. It showed the market gap, the operational inefficiencies of legacy systems, and my solution, not a replacement, but an overlay, a smart, agile software layer that could make old, dumb hardware perform new tricks. I presented in a rented conference room on a rainy Tuesday. I introduced myself as Tessa from the Redcrest floor. I talked about slotting optimization, pick path friction, and dock door bottlenecks. I spoke their language. At the back of the room, Maya Calder watched, her arms crossed. I had asked her to come. When I finished, a former fleet owner named Harkins grunted, "You're proposing a patch, kid, not a revolution." "Revolutions are expensive," I countered, not missing a beat. "And they leave a lot of perfectly good equipment in the scrap heap. I'm not selling a revolution. I'm selling profit. I'm selling a way to get another 10 years out of the hardware you already paid for." I walked out with $150,000 in seed capital. After the signing, Maya handed me her own check. "This isn't an investment, Whitmore," she said. "It's a down payment. I'm quitting Redcrest. I'll be your advisor. You know systems. I know people. You're going to need someone who can spot a liar. I accepted. Maya became my first board advisor. I didn't waste $1 on a fancy office. We rented 2 rooms above a machine shop. The rent was cheap, and the smell of industrial lubricant felt like home. My first hire was Rory Vale. He was a software engineer, a quiet genius who had been fired from 3 different startups for being difficult. He wasn't difficult. He just hated marketing meetings. He lived for complex, ugly problems. "They want me to build apps that sell shoes," he told me in the interview. "It's boring. I want you to build an interface that can talk to a control board that was designed in 1998. I said, "I want you to make it run on a network that also supports 3 ancient dot matrix printers." His eyes lit up. "That's disgusting. I'm in." My second hire was Asha Grant, an optimization specialist I'd met in my Six Sigma class. Asha saw the world as a series of cues. She was relentless, logical, and had 0 patience for inefficiency. The 3 of us became a scalpel. I was the architect, defining the problem I knew intimately from the warehouse floor. Rory was the builder, writing the code that could bridge the gap between 2 generations of technology. Asha was the tester, designing the metrics to prove it worked. Our first minimum viable product was codenamed Bridge, its primary. Unwritten function was its accidental seamless compatibility with the Iron Veil Series J conveyor controller, the same one that ran Redcrest, the same one my father had built his empire on. We needed a pilot program. I didn't go to any of Iron Veil's current customers. Instead, I found 3 independent, family-owned warehouses that had bought their Iron Veil equipment at auction. They were struggling, unable to compete with the big players. I went to them with a simple offer. "Let me install my software for free. I won't charge you a dime. In 90 days, I'll show you the metrics. If you like them, you sign a 2-year service contract. If you don't, I'll take it out. No questions asked." They had nothing to lose. They all said yes. Rory and I installed the systems ourselves, working nights and weekends, crawling under conveyors, plugging into old serial ports. Asha sat in our office, monitoring the data feeds. The results came in fast. Our Bridge software began to intelligently reroute pick orders, batch similar SKUs, and manage conveyor speeds to prevent the exact kinds of jams I had clocked at Redcrest. After 90 days, I presented the key performance indicators. They weren't just good, they were undeniable. Pilot 1, an 18% reduction in order turnaround time. Pilot 2, a 40% reduction in routing errors. Pilot 3, a 22% gain in throughput, with no new hardware. All 3 signed long-term service contracts. I didn't issue a press release. I didn't post on social media. I took those case studies and went to 2 more warehouses, then 4 more. I focused entirely on the subscription model, service as a software. It provided steady, predictable revenue. But more importantly, the service contract gave me something invaluable. It gave me the legal right to monitor their systems, to collect performance data, and to troubleshoot their hardware. I was no longer just a temp on the floor. I was inside their networks. Rory was managing the diagnostic logs from our 8 clients when he called me over. "This is weird," he said, pointing to a line of code in the raw log from a client's Iron Veil controller. "This firmware, it's pinging an external IP, constantly." "A diagnostic ping?" I asked. "No," Rory said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's not just pinging, it's opening a port, a really old, unsecured port. It's a remote access backdoor." I felt a cold stillness settle over me. "A backdoor? For what? Service?" "Maybe," Rory said, frowning. "But it's unsecured. If we can see it, anyone can. Someone with basic skills could get into this network, access the controller, and just stop the conveyor, or speed it up, or shut down the entire warehouse. This isn't just bad code. Tessa, this is a massive, undisclosed safety and security risk." Iron Veil had built a secret door into its client's systems, and it hadn't bothered to lock it. My mind raced. This was the waterline. No, this was the poison in the waterline. We needed proof that Ironvale knew. I had Asha call Ironvale's technical support line, posing as a manager from one of our pilot clients. She reported the vulnerability, framing it as an odd network error. I sat next to her, a digital recorder capturing the call. The first-level tech was useless, but Asha, with her relentless logic, got him to escalate. We finally got a senior engineer on the line. "Oh, yeah, the port 8830 issue," the engineer said, his voice weary. "Look, just put it behind your internal firewall. We know about it." "You know about it?" Asha asked, her voice a perfect imitation of a panicked manager. "It's a wide-open security risk. When is it being patched?" There was a long sigh on the other end. "Listen, ma'am, between you and me, it's on the list, but it's tied into the legacy kernel. We can't patch it without a major release. And management. Management is waiting for the next major release to roll it out. Just block the port." I clicked stop on the recorder. We had it. They knew. They had performed a cost-benefit analysis and decided it was cheaper to risk their client's security than to issue a firmware patch. This was no longer just about business. This was negligence. My first instinct was to go to the press, but a public explosion was a messy, unpredictable weapon. Graham Whitmore was a master at managing public relations. He'd just spin it as a competitor's smear campaign. I needed a different kind of weapon, a quieter one. I took the audio file and a technical brief from Rory and put them in an encrypted file. I sent it, anonymously, from a library computer, to the Granite State Industrial Equipment Safety Commission. I didn't file a complaint. I just sent a tip from a concerned industry observer. I had planted the seed. Now, I had to find the leverage. The next day, I put on the only good suit I owned. I took the elevator to the 23rd floor of the Granite Tower downtown. I had an appointment with Julian Pike, a corporate lawyer whose specialty was, according to his website, complex debt structuring and hostile acquisitions. Pike was all sharp angles and expensive tailoring. He listened without interruption as I explained my hypothetical interest in a certain legacy hardware company. "You don't want to buy the company," he said, steepling his fingers. "That's an equity play. It's slow. It's loud. And based on what you're implying about their safety record, you'd be buying their liabilities." "What's the alternative?" I asked. "Debt," Pike said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Equity is a vote. Debt is a leash. You find out who owns their secured debt. You find out what assets are collateral." I paid his consultation fee. When I got back to my office, I called Maya. "Maya," I said, "you still have friends in accounting at Redcrest, right?" "A few," she said. "Why?" "Redcrest is an Ironvale customer. They pay invoices to them. I need to know who Ironvale banks with, specifically, who holds their line of credit." It took her a day. The answer was a regional bank, Granite Bay Credit. It took me another 2 days, and a significant chunk of my seed money paid to a corporate intelligence firm, to get the rest of the picture. The news was better than I could have imagined. Ironvale wasn't just banking with Granite Bay. They had a massive revolving credit line, and the collateral wasn't just the building, it was the production line itself, the machines that made the machines. And they were in trouble, a cash flow crunch, caused by losing the Omnicorp account and a few others, had forced them to draw heavily on the line. They were now in a penalty interest bracket. The bank was getting nervous. I looked at the report. I looked at the audio file on my computer. I had a path. My father had built a fortress. He was obsessed with his walls. But his cash, his blood, was flowing outside the walls, controlled by a bank that was starting to panic. The Safety Commission investigation, when it landed, would send that bank into a full-blown crisis. I wasn't going to attack Ironvale. I wasn't going to compete with them. I was going to buy their debt. I was going to buy the leash. Julian Pike didn't just practice law. He played it like a grandmaster playing chess. When I returned to his office with a wire transfer for his retainer, he didn't even look at the confirmation. He was already on the phone. "Arthur," he said, his voice smooth as glass, "I have a new player I'm advising. She's interested in the distressed industrial space. She's precise. I'm sending her over." He hung up and looked at me. "Arthur Vance. He runs a private debt fund. Blackwood Equity. They specialize in buying secured debt from nervous lenders. They buy bad loans on good assets. Go, listen, learn." The Blackwood Equity office was the opposite of Pike's. It was a chaotic open-plan room, loud with phones and blinking terminals. Arthur Vance was a man who seemed permanently stressed, subsisting on coffee and adrenaline. "Julian sent you?" he said, not offering me a seat. "What do you want?" "I want to understand how you buy a leash," I said. That got his attention. He stared at me. "Julian was right. You are precise. You're talking about a UCC-1 filing, a Uniform Commercial Code lien. It's the pawn ticket for a corporation. A lender gives a company money. The company pledges its assets, its machines, its buildings, its patents, as collateral. The UCC-1 is the public record of that pledge. The lender becomes the secured creditor. If the company defaults, the secured creditor gets the assets. First in line, always." "And these leashes are for sale?" "Always," Vance said, a predatory grin flashing. "A regional bank like Granite Bay? They're not in the business of owning a conveyor belt factory. They're in the business of lending money. When a loan goes bad, when it looks like a default is coming, they get scared. They'd rather sell that $10 million loan to someone like me for $6 million. Take the loss and get the risk off their books. We buy the loan. We become the secured creditor. Then we get to decide if the company lives or dies." I spent the next 3 days in a data room, financed by my Northline profits, learning everything I could. I learned about covenants, the promises a company makes to its lender. Promises like, "We will maintain a certain cash-to-debt ratio," or "We will not take on more debt." And as I'd hoped, promises like, "We will remain in compliance with all federal and state safety regulations." My path was clear. I needed to become the secured creditor, but I couldn't do it as Tessa Whitmore, and Northline Labs had to remain clean, a neutral software provider. I went back to Julian Pike. "I need a ghost," I said. He nodded. "A special purpose vehicle, an SPV, a legal entity, a shell company, whose only purpose is to hold this asset." 2 days later, Riverton Capital SPV. 17 was born. It was a limited liability company registered in Delaware, with a name that meant nothing to anyone but me. Riverton, for the city that had been my refuge. 17, a random prime number to make it sound sterile and anonymous. The ownership was shielded by a series of trusts Julian had structured. On paper, it was invisible. Now it was time to motivate the seller. I created another anonymous email account. This time, the recipient wasn't the government. It was the chief risk officer at Granite Bay Credit. The email was short. Subject: Urgent. Iron Veil Systems liability. To whom it may concern. As a financial analyst, I am flagging an imminent and undisclosed risk in one of your portfolio companies, Iron Veil Systems. They are currently operating with a known, unpatched firmware backdoor across their Series J controllers. See attached technical brief. This is not just a software big, it is a critical safety and security failure. I have also included an audio file of an Iron Veil senior engineer admitting knowledge of this vulnerability and the company's decision to delay a fix. I have reason to believe the Granite State Safety Commission has been alerted and is opening a preliminary investigation. Your collateral, the production line, is tied to a company that is one industrial accident away from insolvency. Good luck. I attached Rory's technical brief and Asha's audio file. Then I hit send. A bank, I had learned, does not operate on logic. It operates on fear. A regional bank like Granite Bay lived in terror of 2 things: federal regulators and sudden, sharp losses. I had just handed them proof of both. I gave it 4 days. On the 5th day, the Granite State Safety Commission, acting on my first anonymous tip, issued its preliminary finding. It was a small, temporary fine for firmware irregularities, and a formal request for Iron Vale's patch release records. It was all I needed. The fine was public. The investigation was official. The covenant was breached. Julian Pike called Arthur Vance at Blackwood. That industrial asset we discussed. The bank is Granite Bay. They're holding the Iron Vale paper. It just triggered a safety covenant. They're going to be looking for a quiet exit, now. Vance's team made the call. Granite Bay didn't even negotiate hard. They were terrified. The loan had a face value of $22 million. They were in a penalty bracket. And now the underlying company was in regulatory trouble. They wanted out. Riverton Capital, SPV 17, funded by a combination of Northline's profits and a high-risk, high-interest loan from Blackwood Equity itself, bought the entire $22 million debt package. The price, $13,640,000, a 38% discount. The deal closed on a Thursday afternoon. It was an avalanche of digital signatures. When the dust settled, Julian Pike sent me a single, encrypted file. It was the UCC-1, amended. The new secured creditor for Iron Vale Systems was no longer Granite Bay Credit. It was Riverton Capital SPV 17. It was me. I sat in my office, staring at the filing. I was now, effectively, my father's bank. If he missed a single payment, if his cash flow stuttered, I had the right to seize the factory. My stepmother, Evelyn, the nominal chairman of the board, would have seen the notification. But to her, it would just be a routine debt transfer. A faceless bank had sold their loan to a faceless private equity fund. It happened all the time. She wouldn't have given it a second thought. My half-brother, Aiden, certainly didn't notice. That same weekend, his social media lit up. He posted a photo of himself on the deck of a 40-foot motor yacht, christened the Iron King. He was holding a bottle of champagne, grinning, with a caption, "Hard work pays off. Iron Vale CEO in training, blessed." I looked at the picture of Aiden wasting what little cash the company had left, and I felt a cold, clarifying rage. They weren't just negligent, they were arrogant. They were feasting while the ship was taking on water. Aiden's post gave me my next move. The first safety fine had been a warning shot. Now I needed an execution. I sent another anonymous tip to the Safety Commission. This time, I was more specific. Subject: Iron Vale Systems, follow up. Your preliminary fine was ignored. Management is not patching the issue. They are stalling. The attached photo shows company executives misappropriating funds while safety issues persist. You need to look deeper, not at the code, but at the emails. Search the internal server for all correspondence between Evelyn Frost, Graham Whitmore, and the head of engineering regarding firmware and Omnicorp. You will find they knowingly delayed the patch to protect quarterly profit margins. 2 days later, the commission staged an unannounced, on-site inspection. This time, they came with a warrant for the email server. The internal emails, the ones I had gambled on existing, were found. The commission's investigation expanded. The fines would no longer be small. They would be crippling. Iron Vale's stock, which traded on the obscure over-the-counter markets, began to slide. Now the company was bleeding. I owned the debt. I had the legal justification for a default, but I was still missing one piece: a real-time view from inside the fortress. I needed to know exactly when to strike. I needed an inside man. I found him in Victor Lane, Iron Vale's chief financial officer. I knew his name from the UCC filings. He was a numbers man, a career CFO who had been with my father for 2 decades. He was loyal, but I wasn't betting on his conscience. I was betting on his fear. I had Julian Pike arrange a meeting, not at a law firm, but at a quiet bar in the financial district, at 5 p.m. Victor Lane was a man who looked permanently gray suit, gray skin, gray, tired eyes. He sat down opposite me, looking confused. "Mr. Pike's office said this was about the Granite Bay debt transfer," he said, his voice reedy. "Are you from Riverton Capital?" "I am Riverton Capital," I said. He squinted, trying to place me. He hadn't seen me in 15 years. I was just a stranger. I'm not here to renegotiate your payment schedule. Victor, I said, keeping my voice low, I'm here to offer you a choice. I slid a simple, one-page document across the table. It was the Safety Commission's latest finding, the one based on the emails, which hadn't been made public yet. I'd gotten it from a source at Blackwood, who had a source inside the commission. Victor's face went ashen as he read it. How did you get this? The people I work with don't like surprises, I said. This company is going to default. When it does, there will be a forensic audit. They will look at the books. They will look at the expense reports. I paused, then played my card. They will definitely look at Aiden's yacht. Victor flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor. And they will look at the I Sustain Fund, I said. His head snapped up. His eyes, for the first time, showed genuine terror. I had found the name I Sustain on one of the sub-account statements my intelligence firm had pulled. It was a ghost account, one that didn't appear on the main balance sheets. That's a project fund, he whispered, his defense weak. It's a slush fund, I countered, my voice sharp as a razor. It's the account you and Graham used to hide the losses from his pet projects. It's the account you used to pay for things like Aiden's boat. It is, to be precise, felony-level corporate fraud, and your signature is on every transfer. He was trapped. He knew it. What do you want? He choked out. 2 doors. Victor. Door number 1. You stay loyal to Graham. You go down with the ship. The new owners, and there will be new owners, will charge you. You'll lose your license. You'll probably do time. Graham is a fighter. He will paint you as the rogue accountant. He will sacrifice you to save himself, and you know it. I leaned in. Door number 2. You provide me, anonymously, with a complete, real-time feed of the company's financials. The real financials. The I Sustain ledger, the burn rate, the payment schedules. You help me understand exactly where all the bodies are buried. In exchange, the new owners, the ones I represent, will find that your cooperation was invaluable. Your fraud will be filed as a simple accounting error, rectified during the transition. You'll keep your pension. You'll get to retire. He stared at me, his mind calculating, the abacus of his life clicking away. Who are you? He finally asked. I'm the person who just offered you the only lifeboat, I said. Victor Lane nodded. Once. I'll need a secure drop, he said. That night, I received the first file. It was everything. The I Sustain ledger, the projected cash flow deficits, the list of pending lawsuits from clients who had been affected by the back door. I cross-referenced his data with my data, the customer list from Northline Labs. For the first time, I could see the entire picture. I knew exactly which clients had the faulty firmware. I knew which ones were preparing to sue. And now, thanks to Victor, I knew that Ironvale had exactly 0 cash reserves set aside to fight them. My goal, which had once been a vague, burning desire for revenge, was now a precise, multi-step surgical procedure. Ironvale was already insolvent. They just hadn't admitted it yet. I wouldn't let them declare bankruptcy. That would leave the outcome to a judge. I would force them into a structured reorganization. I would use the threat of a default on my secured debt to make them come to the table. And at that table, I would make my offer. I would forgive their debt, in exchange for one thing, 51%. The debt would become equity. I wouldn't just be their bank, I would be their owner. The annual Granite Harbor Tech Summit was a sea of blue lanyards and forced smiles. I was there as the founder of Northline Labs, a rising star in the logistics software space. According to the event program, my company was the buzz of the conference, the quiet, mysterious firm that was fixing problems no one else could. I moved through the crowd, accepting handshakes, my gaze scanning, constantly mapping the room. And then I saw him. He was holding court by the Oyster Bar, a circle of older hardware suppliers around him. Graham Whitmore. 15 years had passed, but he was unchanged. The same expensive suit, the same confident posture, the same way of laughing that was more about displaying power than expressing joy. I felt nothing, no surge of fear, no spike of anger, just observation. The target was in view. I was turning to walk in the opposite direction when a voice from his circle called out, "Tessa, from Northline! Get over here!" It was Harkins, my old seed investor. The circle parted. Graham turned, drink in hand. His eyes met mine. For a single, agonizing second, the world stopped. His smile wavered. He saw me. He saw me, the woman I had become, but his brain was still processing the face of the daughter he had abandoned. "Well, well," he said, recovering, his voice a low, dismissive rumble. He put his drink down and walked toward me, his hand outstretched, enveloping mine in a grip that was meant to dominate. "Look at you, kiddo, all grown up." "Graham," I said, my voice perfectly level. I pulled my hand back. The kiddo was a calculated insult, a way to put me back in my place, the 33-year-old girl on the rainy quad. "Northline Labs," he said, tapping my badge. "That's you. I've been reading about your little company. Clever, very clever." He was sizing me up, not as a daughter, but as a curiosity, maybe a minor competitor. He had no idea. "You're a long way from, well, wherever it was you ended up," he said, gesturing vaguely. "I ended up in Riverton," I said, my voice clear and cold in the din. "At Red Crest Logistics, on your conveyor belts." A flicker of annoyance. He hated being reminded of the factory floor. "Ah, yes, the good old days. We built this whole industry, you know." He launched into a familiar speech, the one about how Ironvale had laid the foundations, how their name meant reliability, how standards were slipping everywhere else. He was boasting about a past that, as I knew from Victor Lane's secret ledgers, was long dead. He was a king bragging about his castle while, unbeknownst to him, I held the deed to the land underneath it. He was avoiding the present. He wasn't talking about the safety fines. He wasn't talking about the collapsed stock price. I let him talk. I waited. When he finally paused, taking a sip of his drink, I asked my question. It was the only one that mattered. "I have a question for you," I said. The circle had gone quiet, sensing the tension. "It's not about business." He looked wary. "What is it?" "That day, at my graduation, if you had the chance to do that day over again, would you do anything differently?" He stared at me, genuinely perplexed, as if I'd asked him to solve a complex equation in his head. He was calculating, was it a trick? Was I offering an emotional opening? He decided it was weakness. He gave a short, sharp laugh, a laugh I remembered from when he'd fired a line foreman for asking for a raise. "Differently?" he scoffed. "Tessa, you still don't get it. You were an investment that didn't pan out. You were a distraction. Business is about one thing, cutting your losses early. It was the best decision I could have made. For both of us. It made you tough, didn't it?" He smiled, triumphant, as if he had just given me a gift. "Thank you," I said. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." "Tessa, darling." A cloud of expensive perfume and frantic energy descended. Evelyn Frost, my stepmother, all white teeth and diamonds, her eyes darting over my shoulder, looking for someone more important to talk to. She hadn't even looked at my face, just my badge. "Northline Labs," she said, her voice a breathless coo. "I've been hearing that name. We at Ironvale are looking for strategic tech partnerships. My son, Aiden, our VP of Strategy, is building our new digital division." She was so focused on the name on my badge that she hadn't recognized the name on my face. She didn't know who I was. She pressed a heavy embossed business card into my hand. "Call my office. We'll set a lunch. We are very interested in what you're doing." "Evelyn," Graham said, his voice tight with warning, but it was too late. Aiden, my half-brother, drifted over, looking pale and soft in a suit that was too expensive for him. He was clutching his phone, his thumb swiping nervously. "Mom, we have a problem," he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. "That reporter from the..."
Not now, Aiden, Evelyn hissed.
No, it's important, he insisted, his voice cracking with a patrician panic. They're asking about the debt restructuring. We need to push the other narrative. He looked at me, a stranger, and tried to puff himself up. You should know. We're not worried. We're about to close a massive deal. A strategic overseas investor. They're basically going to buy us out, for a huge premium. It was the bluff I'd seen in Victor's reports. A lie, paper thin, designed to stop the panic. And he had just delivered it to me, his company's largest and most hostile creditor. I looked at the three of them. The arrogant father who saw me as a loss to be cut. The oblivious stepmother who was trying to partner with the woman who was actively dismantling her company. And the idiot son, who had just confirmed his desperation in a public forum. They hadn't just abandoned me, they had forgotten me. They had erased me so completely that they couldn't even see the enemy standing right in front of them. They still saw people as entries on a balance sheet, assets or liabilities. I looked at the business card in my hand. Evelyn Frost, chairman. I let it drop to the floor. I don't think the partnership will be a good fit, I said, and I walked away, leaving the three of them staring at my back. That night, I didn't go to sleep. I went to my closet and pulled out the old, charcoal gray suitcase. I placed it in the center of my living room floor. Like a bomb, I was finally ready to defuse. My hands were steady. I took a box cutter and slit the duct tape, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet apartment. I pulled back the fabric lining. There it was, the cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax, for later. Later was finally here. I slid my thumbnail under the seal. It flaked and broke. I unfolded the paper inside. It wasn't a letter from my father. It was 2 documents. The first was a stock certificate, thick, watermarked paper, dated 15 years ago. It was for a small, almost trivial number of shares in a private, pre-expansion Iron Veil Systems. The name on the certificate was not mine. It was Eleanor Vance Whitmore, my mother. My knees buckled. I sat hard on the floor, the certificate in my hand. My mother had been dead since I was 9. She was an engineer, the one who had, according to family legend, helped my father build his first prototype. He had erased her from the company's history as thoroughly as he had tried to erase me. The second document was a letter, folded 3 times. The handwriting was elegant, precise. It was hers. I had only a few of her letters, from when I was at summer camp, and I knew the slope of her T anywhere. My dearest Tessa, if you are reading this, it means 2 things. 1, you have graduated from university, which I always knew you would. And 2, your father has given you this suitcase. I am so proud of you. I am writing this in case I am not there to tell you myself. This suitcase, it was mine. I carried my first blueprints in it. Graham. He has a complicated relationship with the past. He may see this as junk, but I wanted you to have it. Inside this envelope, you will find my original founder's issue shares in Iron Veil. They are not many, but they are important. I have legally bound them in a trust. They are yours, and yours alone, with the transfer automatically executing on the date of your college graduation. He can't stop it. He probably doesn't even remember it exists. Graham is a brilliant builder, Tessa, but he is a terrible partner. He cuts corners. He cuts people. I always worried he would cut you. He thinks his way is the only way, but he's forgotten how the foundation was built. This certificate is more than just paper. It comes with a code, 44B812. It is for a safe deposit box at the Granite First Local Bank, the one on Old Market Street. Inside that box, you will find my copies of the original incorporation documents, the original shareholder agreements, the ones we all signed before Graham and his new lawyers rewrote them. They contain a clause, a technical and safety covenant, that I insisted on. Graham hated it. He called it sentimental. I called it smart. I don't know what your life is. I hope you're happy. I hope he has been good to you. But if he hasn't, if he has ever treated you like a liability, this is your key. Your strength is not his strength. Tessa, his is brittle, yours is forged. He may have built the walls, but you have the foundation. I love you more than all the stars.
Mom.
I was wrong. I was so wrong. I had spent 15 years fueled by the cold, dark energy of his rejection. I thought the suitcase was his final goodbye. It wasn't. It was his ultimate, arrogant, careless mistake. He hadn't abandoned me with a suitcase. He had, with his own 2 hands, delivered the one weapon in the world that could destroy him. A weapon he had been asked to hold by my mother, and had forgotten, because he saw no value in it. This wasn't just my fight anymore. This wasn't revenge for a girl left in the rain. This was a reclamation. This was for Eleanor. I looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. The Granite First local bank opened at 9 in the morning. I folded the letter and placed it against my chest. I closed my eyes. The cold, burning rage I had carried for a decade was gone. In its place, something new was blooming, something hot and heavy and sharp. It was not courage, it was purpose. I was at the Granite First local bank at 8:55 the next morning. My mother's letter a warm, solid square in my pocket. The bank was old, all marble and brass, a relic from a different era. At precisely 9 a.m., I was escorted into the vault. The attendant, a stern woman who looked as old as the bank itself, took my mother's key and the code, 44B812. There was a mechanical groan as she turned her key and mine. She pulled out a long, narrow metal box, coated in a thin layer of dust. It hadn't been opened in at least 2 decades. She slid it into a private viewing room and left, closing the door behind me. The room smelled of old paper and contained air. My hands were shaking. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no jewelry, no cash, just documents, perfectly preserved. The first was a notarized copy of the original Iron Vale Systems shareholder register. I saw my father's name, Graham Whitmore, and 2 others, and then hers, Eleanor Vance Whitmore. The second was the capital contribution agreement from the company's founding. My mother's contribution wasn't listed as cash. It was listed as all rights, title, and interest in and to United States Patent Number 4588-112, a system for modular conveyor process management. My mother hadn't just helped him. She had invented the core product, the modular process. The very thing that Iron Vale had built its empire on was hers. I dug deeper, and I found the original Articles of Incorporation. Tucked into the bylaws was a section, Article 9, Section 4. It was titled, The Engineer's Covenant. I read it, and my breath caught. It was a reserved clause, a poison pill. It stated that if the company was found to be in willful violation of any state or federal safety standard directly related to the process outlined in Patent 4588-112, then any shareholder from the original founder's pool, which now just meant her shares, would be granted the immediate right to call an extraordinary meeting of all shareholders to review the company's bylaws and leadership. It was a time bomb she had planted at the very beginning. A bomb set to go off only if my father corrupted her work, her legacy, and with the Safety Commission's findings on the firmware. He had just pulled the pin. The last item in the box was a letter from a law firm, dated a week after the incorporation. It was addressed to my mother. It was short. Eleanor, per your request, the covenant is embedded. It's unusual, and Graham fought it, but it's legally ironclad. It links the safety of the product to your power as a shareholder. As we discussed, if you or your heir are ever treated unfairly, and if that unfairness extends to the integrity of your work, this is the legal path. Use it wisely. I had it. I had the legal mechanism. I had the moral justification. I had my mother's blessing. I was at Julian Pike's office within the hour. He spread the ancient documents on his glass conference table, his eyes bright with a lawyer's hunger. He read the covenant 3 times. "This is beautiful," he whispered. "This is a masterpiece. He's not just in breach of a bank loan, he's in breach of the founding document of his own company, and your mother tied it directly to her shares that are now your shares." "Is it enough to call the meeting?" I asked. "It's enough to light a fire," he said. "The Safety Commission's fine is the match. But we need kerosene. We need to prove the violation was willful and that the board, your stepmother, knew. We need to tie the firmware backdoor directly to that covenant." I knew who to call. I stepped into the hallway and sent a secure message to Victor Lane. "Victor, I have a new priority. I need the complete, unedited server logs for the firmware development team. I need every email, every memo, related to the Port 8830 issue for the last 2 years. I need you to back them up to an external drive now, and then lock all administrative rights to delete those files. Do it." He replied in under a minute, "They're already locked. I was waiting for you to ask." An hour later, the file was on my server. It was a cascade of corporate malfeasance. I saw the first panicked emails from engineers. I saw the escalating warnings. And then I saw the smoking gun. It was an email chain. The head of engineering was formally requesting an emergency budget of $70,000 to develop and roll out an immediate patch for the back door. The final response was not from Graham. It was from Evelyn. Subject: Urgent. Firmware budget request. This is not approved. We are already tracking low for the third quarter, and I will not authorize an unplanned expense that jeopardizes our quarterly dividend. The risk is theoretical. The loss will be real. Table this until the budget review for the next fiscal year. She had signed her name to it. She had, in writing, valued a quarterly report over the safety of every single one of their clients. She had delayed the patch to make her numbers look good. I forwarded the file to Julian. "This is the kerosene," I said. Now it was time to make my financial move. I was a creditor, and I was an heir, but I needed to consolidate my power. As Riverton Capital, I went to work. Ironvale had other, smaller creditors, parts suppliers, a shipping company, who were also panicking. They were unsecured, meaning they were last in line to get paid. I approached 2 of them through Julian, with a simple offer. "Ironvale is insolvent," he told them. "You can fight for pennies in a bankruptcy court, or you can join our restructuring plan. We, as the secured creditor, are converting our debt into equity. We will offer you a smaller, but guaranteed, slice of that same equity." They were terrified. They agreed instantly. Julian drew up the preliminary restructuring agreement. Riverton Capital would absorb their bad debt. In return, my $22 million leash would be converted into a 19% block of preferred stock in a newly structured Ironvale. It was a paper transaction that fundamentally changed my position. When I added my mother's small, inherited Founders Pool shares to that new 19% block, I had crossed the legal threshold. The covenant was active. I now had the legal standing, as a significant shareholder with special rights, to force the extraordinary general meeting. The trap was set. Right on cue. My half-brother, Aiden, made his move. He must have felt the walls closing in, because he did exactly what an idiot does under pressure. He launched a public relations campaign. Newspaper ads and online banners appeared. Ironvale Systems, a legacy of safety, a future of innovation. There was a fawning interview with Aiden in a local business journal, where he dismissed the safety concerns as rumors spread by new competitors and called Ironvale a pioneer in industrial safety. It was the single dumbest thing he could have done. The Granite State Safety Commission, which had been quietly building its case, was publicly humiliated. They responded with fury. The very next day, the commission released its full, unredacted report. They announced the evidence of a willful cover-up by the board. They bypassed another warning and went straight to the punishment. A crippling, 7-figure fine, with a pending order to recall every single Series J controller for a mandatory, on-site patch, all at Ironvale's expense. The market, which had been nervous, now entered a freefall. The over-the-counter stock, which had been sliding, now evaporated. It lost 80% of its value in one day. Aiden's strategic overseas investor vanished. The lie was exposed. The bluff had been called. Now, I made my final move. While the company was publicly imploding, I was in a quiet, unmarked office in the financial district. I was meeting with Northbridge Infrastructure, a massive, patient, multi-billion-dollar fund. They didn't care about quarterly reports. They cared about owning essential assets. I laid out my plan. I showed them Northline's software. I showed them the Ironvale restructuring plan. I showed them the path to profitability. Once the current corrupt management was removed. They are toxic, I said. But the hardware is the backbone of this region. The company isn't the problem. The leadership is. I am going to remove it. I have the debt. I have the shares. I have the legal case. I need the capital to buy the remaining equity and take the company private. They signed the term sheet before I finished my coffee. I had a blank check, ready to be cashed the moment I took control. I thought I had every piece. I was wrong. That night, an anonymous email landed in my inbox. It wasn't from Victor. The address was a random string of letters. Subject: You missed one. You think it's just bad software. You don't know the half of it. Come to the old logistics depot, Warehouse Block C, on the river. Tonight. See what he's really hiding. My blood ran cold. I called Maya. I need you, I said. And bring a flashlight. Warehouse Block C was in the most derelict part of the Riverton Industrial Park. It was a corrugated steel shed that was supposed to be empty, its lease long expired. The chain on the gate was locked, but the side door was not. Maya and I slipped inside, the beams of our flashlights cutting through the dusty, silent air. The warehouse was full. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, packed with thousands of Ironvale boxes. They looked new. This is just overstock, Maya whispered, running a hand along a box. No, I said. I had seen enough warehouses to know this was wrong. The air was wrong. It smelled of solvent and rust. I took my flashlight and pointed it at a box at the end of the aisle. The tape was new, but the cardboard beneath it was water-stained. I took my keys and cut the tape. I opened the box. Inside was a conveyor roller. It was bright blue, with a fresh Ironvale logo stenciled on it, but I could see, under the fresh paint, a deep gouge, pits of rust. This isn't new, I said, my voice low. This is refurbished. We started opening more boxes, a motor housing, cracked and crudely welded, painted over, a box of bearings, gritty with dust, relubricated and sealed in new plastic, a stack of conveyor belts, patched and recoated, smelling of chemicals. My God, Maya breathed, pulling out a part number. I remember these. These are from the Omnicorp recall. They were supposed to be destroyed. He hadn't destroyed them. He was having them illegally refurbished, repainted, and repackaged in new boxes, then filtering them back into his own supply chain as new, certified parts. This wasn't just negligence. This wasn't just a software bug. This was a criminal conspiracy. He was actively selling counterfeit, dangerous parts to his own customers to save money. I looked at the shelves, at the thousands of accidents waiting to happen. The firmware backdoor was a hidden risk. This was a warehouse full of landmines. I took out my phone and started taking pictures. The fight wasn't just about debt and equity anymore. It was about stopping a man who would burn his own customers to keep his castle from crumbling. I didn't wait until morning. At 3 a.m., my hands still covered in the grime from that warehouse. I sat at my laptop and compiled everything. The photos of the counterfeit parts, the address of Warehouse Block C, the list of part numbers Maya had identified from the Omnicorp recall. I sent this new, devastating file to the Granite State Safety Commission. My anonymous tipster identity was now, I imagined, legendary inside their offices. This wasn't a software bug anymore. This was tangible, physical, criminal fraud. The commission's response was not a fine. It was a raid. By 7 a.m., before the rest of the city had its first coffee, state inspectors, accompanied by local law enforcement, were padlocking the doors of Block C. The news hit the local wire service by 8. This lit a fire under every front. The legal battle erupted first. Julian Pike had formally filed my petition for the Extraordinary General Meeting, citing the Engineers' Covenant and my mother's shares. Evelyn's legal team, a high-priced firm from downtown, responded immediately. They filed a motion to dismiss, calling the petition frivolous and an attempt at corporate sabotage by a minor, irrelevant shareholder. They argued that the covenant from the Articles of Incorporation was archaic, superseded by 30 years of bylaws. Julian was in court before lunch, his face alight with the thrill of the fight. He didn't just argue, he eviscerated. He presented the judge with the original notarized articles, my mother's patent, and the Safety Commission's brand new warrant for Warehouse Block C. Your Honor, he argued, his voice ringing in the courtroom, this is not an irrelevant clause. It is the moral foundation of the company, a foundation the current board has willfully corrupted, not just with software, but, as of this morning, with what appears to be a criminal conspiracy to sell counterfeit parts. My client's rights, as the heir to the very engineer who created this technology, are not just relevant, they are the only thing that matters. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had seen everything, denied Evelyn's motion in under 10 minutes. The meeting was on. Then, my personal front exploded. My phone rang with an unknown number. It was Aiden. He sounded small, terrified, and was trying to mask it with his usual, unearned bravado.
Tessa? Is this Northline? He stammered.
This is Tessa, I said. Look, I heard about your meeting with my mother. Things got off on the wrong foot. We know what you're doing. You've been buying up some of our distressed paper, haven't you? Smart. Very smart. What do you want, Aiden? Arrangement, he said, the words sounding slippery. Look, we're in a bit of a temporary crunch. This whole thing, it's a misunderstanding. But we're finalizing our strategic partnership, the one I told you about. So, here's a chance for you. Sell us back our debt. We'll even give you a premium. A 15% premium. A tidy profit for you. And we get this little annoyance off our books before we close the big deal. He was lying, and he was a bad liar. He was trying to buy the leash from me, not knowing I already owned the dog. He was using the mythical overseas investor line on me, the one I knew was a fantasy. 15%? I said, letting a note of interest creep into my voice. Yes, exactly, he said, relieved. A clean, fast, cash profit. So what's your number? What do you hold? I'm afraid, I said, my voice turning to ice, that my position isn't for sale, not for 15%, not for anything. I'll see you at the meeting. Aiden. I hung up on his sputtering. The chaos was breeding opportunity. Victor Lane, my man on the inside, was now in a full-blown panic. He wasn't just afraid of an audit. He was afraid of being an accessory to the counterfeit parts scheme. He sent me another encrypted file, his most valuable yet. It was Ironvale's corporate insurance policy, a massive, multi-million-dollar liability umbrella, and he had, with a red pen, circled the exclusions clause. The policy was null and void if management had prior knowledge of a critical safety or security flaw and willfully failed to rectify it. Evelyn's email, the one she had sent to save $70,000, was not just bad judgment. It had invalidated their entire corporate insurance. The lawsuits that were coming, and they were coming, would have to be paid from the company's non-existent cash. She had exposed them, totally and completely. I now had the legal club. I had the financial leash. I had the criminal evidence. It was time to control the narrative. I made a call to Sloane Archer. She was an investigative reporter for the Granite Harbor Chronicle, a woman with a reputation for digging until she hit bedrock. I had been feeding her anonymous tips about the Safety Commission for weeks, building her trust, and letting her build the story. Now, I was ready to meet her. We met at a coffee shop far from downtown. She was sharp, in her late 40s, with eyes that missed nothing. "You're my source," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm a software CEO," I said, "and I'm one of Ironvale's biggest customers, or at least, my clients are. My company, Northline, makes software that runs on their hardware, and their hardware is a time bomb." I told her nothing about my family, nothing about my past. I framed my entire motive as a concerned CEO trying to protect her clients and the integrity of the local supply chain.
The firmware backdoor is the story you thought you had, I said, sliding a plain folder across the table. But the real story is in there. Inside the folder was not my mother's letter. It was the report from Warehouse Block C. It was the insurance policy's exclusion clause. It was Evelyn's email, redacted to remove her name, but showing a board-level executive's decision. I'm not just giving you a story, Sloan, I said. I'm giving you the anatomy of a corporate collapse. The question you should be asking isn't, is Ironvale in trouble? The question is, how many warehouses in this state are currently at risk because this one company's board decided to gamble with public safety to protect a dividend? Her eyes lit up. This was blood in the water. Why give this to me? She asked, her gaze suspicious. Why not just sue them? Because my clients can't wait for a lawsuit, I said. The supply chain can't wait. This needs sunlight, now. The story ran on the front page of the Chronicle's business section 2 days later. Hidden risks. Are faulty ghost parts and hackable hardware running Granite State's warehouses? Sloan's article was a masterpiece. It laid out the firmware vulnerability, the new, explosive evidence of counterfeit parts, and the insurance nightmare. It didn't name Evelyn, but it quoted a high-level board directive. It concluded by asking what a company's legacy was worth if it was built on a foundation of hidden dangers. The article set the entire industry on fire. Ironvale's major clients, the ones who hadn't already fled, were now publicly demanding answers. The pressure on the company was becoming unbearable. And that's when my father called me. He didn't call Northline's main number. He called my direct line, which I had never given him. He must have pulled a favor to get it. He was done sending his children. He was coming himself. Tessa, his voice boomed, trying to project the old, familiar authority. He didn't say hello. You've been busy. Just running a business. Graham, you should know what that's like. Don't be clever, he snapped. I saw that article. I know you're the one who's been stirring this up. Northline, you've been effective. You're trying to poach our clients by manufacturing a crisis. I don't manufacture anything but software. Graham, I just report what I find. And I find your hardware is a liability. There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, controlling his temper. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. It was the voice he used to close a deal. You've made your point, he said. You're smart. You're smart. But this is bad for the whole industry. All this public noise. It's time to stop. Stop what? This, he said. This fight. It's unnecessary. We can partner, your software, our hardware, Northline and Ironvale. We could integrate your patch and sell it as a premium upgrade. We could corner the market, together. I almost laughed. After everything, after the fraud, the negligence, the abandonment, he was offering me a job, a partnership. He was, once again, trying to buy the one thing he didn't understand. I'm flattered, Graham, I said, my voice cold and final. But Northline has a very strict policy. I only buy things that are broken and need fixing. And at Ironvale, the biggest thing that needs fixing isn't the equipment. I hung up. The final domino fell 3 days later. It was the end of the month. As Victor Lane's ledgers had predicted, Ironvale did not have the cash to make the quarterly interest payment on its debt. The automatic default notice was triggered. My father, in a panic, must have called Granite Bay Credit, the bank he thought still held his loan, to beg for an extension. A shocked loan officer at Granite Bay would have informed him that, no, they didn't hold his debt. It had been sold, months ago, to a private holding company, a company he had never heard of. Riverton Capital SPV 17. Julian Pike received the call from Graham's lawyer an hour later. The voice on the other end was no longer arrogant. It was terrified. The extraordinary general meeting was formally set. By mutual agreement, all parties would convene. Monday, 9 a.m, Riverton Exchange Hall. The night before the meeting, I was at the Northline office, going over my presentation one last time with Julian and Maya. We were the only ones there. It's done, Julian said, closing his briefcase. We have the votes. The small shareholders are terrified. They'll follow anyone with a lifeboat, and you are the only one. It's not over until it's over, I said. We left at 10 p.m. I was the last one out. I locked the door. The next morning, I arrived early, at 7, to pick up my notes. The glass door to the office was shattered. I froze. I pushed the door open, my heart hammering. The office was a wreck. Desks were overturned. Papers were everywhere. They hadn't been gentle. Tessa, Maya ran up, her face pale. She had just arrived. What happened? He found out, I whispered. He must have finally connected Riverton and Northline. I stopped. My desk was the only one they hadn't completely destroyed. It was messy, but my laptop was still there. Nothing was gone. My hard drives were still there. My server was untouched. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. And then I saw it, sitting perfectly in the center of my desk. On top of my printed presentation was a small, brass key. It was a key for a suitcase. It was an exact duplicate of the key my mother had left me, the one I had thrown away years ago. I know who you are, I said, the words catching in my throat. This was Aiden's work. It had his clumsy, theatrical, panicked signature all over it, a last-ditch effort to intimidate me. Maya came over, her face hardening. She looked at the key. She looked at me. She didn't say anything. She just walked to her desk, pulled something from her drawer, and came back. She pressed a small, heavy object into my hand. It was a new, digital combination lock. The past, Maya said, her voice firm, doesn't get to have the key. You're not that girl anymore. Go home. Change. Put your war paint on. I'll clean this up. I did. I went home, showered, and put on my best suit, the one I'd bought for this day. I set my alarm for a short, 1-hour nap. But I didn't sleep. At 5:30, the alarm went off. It was still dark. I couldn't breathe in the apartment. I put on my running shoes and walked out into the pre-dawn cold. I walked, as I had done so many times, to the Granite Harbor docks. I stood at the end of the pier, the one that looked out at the ocean. I watched the black water turn to gray, then to a deep, cold blue. The first sliver of sun cut across the horizon. I had been abandoned in the rain. I had been forged in the warehouse. I had been armed by my mother. And now, the sun was rising. It was time to go to war. The Riverton Exchange Hall was a cold, grand room with high ceilings and dark wood paneling. It was too large for the number of people present, making the empty chairs feel like accusations. The minor shareholders, a collection of retirees and small-time local investors, huddled together in the front rows, their faces etched with anxiety. On the dais, Evelyn Frost, flanked by my father and Aiden, tapped the microphone. It shrieked with feedback. "Welcome," she began, her voice a strained, bright falsetto. "Welcome to this special meeting. We know there has been a lot of noise in the media, but I am here to assure you that the future is bright. I'd like to direct your attention to the screen for our Vision 2030 plan." An image of a gleaming, futuristic factory appeared. It was a fantasy. The room was not impressed. They were shuffling their papers. The damning newspaper article from Sloan Archer, visible on top of many stacks. Evelyn was about to speak again when Julian Pike stood up from his seat in the front row. He was not on the dais. He was with the crowd. "A point of order, Madam Chairman." Julian's voice cut through the room, sharp and clear. "Before we discuss a hypothetical vision, we must address the reality of the present. I am formally submitting this shareholder petition, as per the company's own articles of incorporation, based on the board's willful violation of its own safety covenants." A legal aide began handing a thick document to every shareholder. The room's anxious murmur turned into a sharp, focused buzz. Evelyn's smile froze. Graham, who had been staring at his hands, looked up, his eyes narrowing. "This is a procedural outrage," Evelyn's lawyer began, jumping to his feet. "This," Julian countered, is the law, and the petition requires a new motion to be heard, now. This was my cue. I stood up from my seat beside Julian. I walked to the aisle, and I did not stop until I was at the portable lectern at the front of the room, facing the board. Evelyn squinted at me, the same polite confusion she'd had at the tech summit. I'm sorry. Do you... And then, for the first time in 15 years, I took the microphone, and I spoke to my family. My name, I said, my voice echoing, amplified, is Tessa Whitmore. I watched the name hit them. Evelyn's hand went to her throat. Aiden's mouth fell open. And my father, Graham Whitmore. He went completely, deathly still. His face drained of all color. He stared at me, and in his eyes, I saw the final, frantic calculation, the girl in the rain, the tech CEO, the anonymous source, Riverton Capital. It all snapped into place, a horrifying, completed circuit. He finally knew who he was fighting. The shareholders were whispering, Whitmore? Another one? I am here in two capacities, I continued, my voice cold and steady, a surgeon's scalpel. First, I am the founder of Northline Labs, a company whose clients are at direct risk from your faulty hardware. Second, I am the sole managing partner of Riverton Capital SPV 17, the entity that, as of its default 2 days ago, is now the legal owner of all of Ironvale's secured debt. A gasp went through the room. They were not just in trouble. They were owned by a stranger. But most importantly, I said, I am here as a shareholder, by the legacy and the last will of Ironvale's first engineer, the woman who wrote the patent on your modular conveyor system, my mother, Eleanor Vance Whitmore. The room exploded. She has no right, Evelyn shrieked, finding her voice. She has every right, Julian's voice boomed from the back. I held up my hand. I am not here to debate history. I am here to present facts. Fact 1. The board, specifically, Evelyn Frost, was made aware of the firmware backdoor and willfully delayed a patch, violating its own safety covenant and the law. I put Evelyn's email on the main screen. Her Vision 2030 was replaced by her own damning words. Fact 2. The company, under Graham Whitmore's supervision, has been actively engaged in criminal fraud, reconditioning faulty parts from the Omnicorp recall and selling them as new, as evidenced by the state's seizure of Warehouse Block C. I put the pictures of the rusted, repainted parts on the screen. A woman in the front row cried out. Fact 3. As a direct result of that email, I pointed back to Evelyn's words. Ironvale's corporate liability insurance is now null and void. The company is completely exposed to the hundreds of lawsuits that are now being filed. I let that sink in. The company was naked. This is not a company in a temporary crunch, I said, looking at Aiden. This is a company that has been fatally mismanaged by a board that is either negligent, corrupt, or both. Therefore, I put forth the following resolution. A vote of no confidence in the current board, its immediate dissolution, and the appointment of a special restructuring committee to be led by the primary secured creditor, Riverton Capital. She's lying, Aiden half screamed, standing up so fast his chair toppled over. This is a hostile takeover. She's the competitor, Northline. She's been feeding that reporter, Sloan Archer, dirty tricks to drive the stock down. This is sabotage. He was loud, he was panicked, and he was, at that exact moment, monumentally stupid. Julian, who had been watching his phone, looked up and nodded at me. In the lobby, just outside the glass doors, Sloan Archer was, as planned, live tweeting the meeting, her latest tweet, which every financial reporter in the state was following, now read, Aiden Whitmore claims sabotage by a competitor, refuses to address criminal fraud charges, tense. The public pressure was now locked in. I walked back to the podium, past a fuming, red-faced Aiden. Mr. Whitmore is right about one thing, I said calmly. This is a takeover, but it is not a hostile one. It is a rescue. I signaled to Julian. This isn't about sabotage. It's about insolvency. I pointed to the screen again. This is a letter of intent from Northbridge Infrastructure, one of the largest and most stable capital funds in the country. They have agreed to fully recapitalize Ironvale, pay the fines, and fund the recall, on one non-negotiable condition. I let the room hang. They will only do so after the restructuring. They will only fund a company that is under new, competent management. They will fund Riverton Capital's plan, which begins with the conversion of our debt into a controlling equity stake. I now had their attention. I had shown them the poison. Now I was showing them the antidote. This is all, he said. She said, Evelyn's lawyer blustered, but his voice was weak. Where is the proof of insolvency? I'm glad you asked, I said. I'd like to call on Mr. Victor Lane, your own chief financial officer, to perform the legally required solvency test. A hush fell. Victor, gray and trembling, walked slowly to the lectern. He was holding his own ledger. He did not look at my father. He looked at the paper. Mr. Lane, I said, is Ironvale Systems currently solvent? Victor swallowed. Based on current assets, pending liabilities from the fines, the recall, and the voided insurance, and the failure to make the debt payment. No, the company is not. Without a massive, immediate cash infusion, Ironvale Systems will be forced into a Chapter 7 liquidation within, by my estimate, 45 days. The small shareholders understood. Liquidation meant they got nothing. Zero. The vote was lost. My father's fortress had just evaporated. Point of procedure, Evelyn's lawyer stammered, frantically searching his briefcase. This is a material change. These documents, this Northbridge offer, we demand a 30-day adjournment to review. He was stalling, trying to find a loophole, a way to fight this in court for years. Julian Pike smiled. He stood and walked to the dais. An excellent, prudent suggestion, Julian said, his voice full of false sympathy. Unfortunately, you seem to have missed a clause in the very document you're holding. He took the copy of the petition. You see, the engineer's covenant, my client's mother's special clause, was very specific. She was a smart woman. He read from the paper. In the event that this covenant is invoked due to a willful safety violation, any and all votes pertaining to the removal or change of corporate leadership must be concluded, by closed ballot, within the same business day. He looked up at the lawyer. My client's mother didn't want the people who broke her company to have 30 days to hide the evidence. The vote must happen. Today. Checkmate. The room was in chaos. The moderator, a shell-shocked local judge, banged his gavel. Order! We will have order! We will take a 10-minute recess to prepare the ballots. 10 minutes! The board was bundled off to a side room. The shareholders began to buzz. I stood alone by the lectern, my adrenaline fading, leaving me cold and clear. And then he was there. Graham. He had somehow slipped away from his lawyers. He looked old. The swagger was gone. His eyes were hollow. He stood too close to me, in the corner by the water cooler. Tessa, he whispered. It was the first time he had used my name without kiddo in 20 years. Graham. He looked at me, his gaze searching, desperate, and utterly baffled. Why? Why all this? The debt? The press? All of it? Why not just come to me? What do you want? I looked at him, the man who saw the world as a balance sheet, the man who cut his losses early. You're right, I said. You taught me to cut my losses. I turned away from him and walked back to the front of the room. I reached under the table for my bag, but I didn't pull out my notes. I pulled out the old, battered, charcoal gray suitcase. I walked to the main podium, the one where my father and Evelyn had stood. I lifted the suitcase, and with a heavy, definitive thunk, I placed it on the center of the dark wood, its scuffed corners and my name, T. Whitmore, facing the room. The shareholders, my future, quieted. I looked at my father, who was frozen in the corner. I had answered his question. I'm here, I said. my voice quiet but carrying to the front rows. To fix the name on the door. The recess was chaos, but the vote itself was silent, swift, and brutal. The moderator, his face grim, read the tally from the closed ballots. The resolution had passed. The old board was out. A restructuring committee, to be led by the primary secured creditor, Riverton Capital, was approved. The room, which had been buzzing, fell into a stunned silence. They had done it, but they had no idea what came next. They had just handed the keys to a ghost. My father sat down, hard, in his chair on the dais. Evelyn looked like she was going to be sick. I did not give them a moment to breathe. The acceleration was the weapon. "Thank you," I said, stepping back to the podium where the suitcase still sat. "We will not be wasting time. The rescue of Iron Veil Systems begins in the next 100 days. Julian, the presentation." Julian clicked a button, and the screen behind me lit up. It was no longer a fantasy. It was a plan. "Effective immediately," I announced, my voice filling the hall. "Northline Labs is integrating its technical team with Iron Veils. Day 1. We patch the firmware. We are not waiting for a major release. We are pushing the patch to every single client, free of charge, by the end of this week." I saw the Iron Veil engineers in the back row, the ones who had been warning management for years, look at each other. One of them nodded, a slow, grim look of relief. Day 10. We begin a full mandatory recall of every counterfeit part from Warehouse Block C. We will publish the full list of fraudulent part numbers, and our teams will replace them at our cost. I clicked to the next slide. Day 30. We will be fully reinsured. Northbridge Infrastructure is not just providing capital, they are providing their umbrella liability policy. Iron Veil will be backed by a $20 billion fund. The shareholders, who had been staring at the prospect of total ruin, visibly uncoiled. I had just reinsured their entire world. And Day 60, a full compensation fund for clients who suffered downtime due to the security flaw. We are not hiding from our mistakes. We are paying for them, and then we are fixing them. It was a total reversal of my father's philosophy. It was an investment, not a cost-cutting. This is theater." Evelyn's voice was shrill. She was standing now, her face blotchy. "She's blaming us for market conditions. There is no proof of willful." "Proof," I said, cutting her off. "You're right. We should have proof." I looked at Victor Lane, who was sitting in the front row. He nodded once, his face pale. "Julian," I said. The screen changed. It was no longer my slide deck. It was a video file. Security camera footage from the Iron Veil conference room, dated 6 months ago. The audio, which Victor had recorded from his own laptop during the meeting, was crystal clear. We saw Evelyn, at the head of the table, talking to the head of engineering. "I don't care if the risk is significant. Mark," her voice echoed in the exchange hall. "The cost is $70,000. I am not taking a $70,000 hit to my quarterly profits. We are trying to attract an investor. We will not show a loss. We will not delay the patch. Am I clear?" The room was dead silent. The mask was not just ripped off. It was vaporized. This was not a mistake. It was a choice. The clip ended. My father, in a single, desperate, and surprisingly loyal move, stood up. That clip is taken out of context," he stammered, looking at Evelyn. It was my decision, the board. Evelyn, she simply carried out my directive, the final call. It was mine. I take responsibility." It was a noble lie, but I had the receipts. Julian's remote clicked again. The screen changed to an email chain, the one I had given the Safety Commission. It showed the engineer's original request. It showed Evelyn's denial. And then, at the very bottom, a new email. My father, forwarding the entire chain to his personal account, with a single, typed comment. "Evelyn, good. This is the right call. Hold the line. We don't pay for theoreticals." He hadn't taken the blame. He had given silent approval. He had let her sign the order. But he had pushed her hand. He was a coward, a layer of insulation, even in his final moments. He knew, a shareholder whispered, loud enough for all of us to hear. Before anyone could react to the dual unmasking, the heavy oak doors at the back of the hall swung open. It was not security. It was 2 men and 1 woman in dark, official-looking suits. They were followed by Sloane Archer, who was holding her phone up, and a man with a press camera. "What is the meaning of this?" Evelyn's lawyer shouted. The man in the front held up a badge. "I'm with the regional SEC office. This is Agent Riley from the State Safety Commission. We have a subpoena for all board members of Iron Veil Systems, pending a joint investigation into securities fraud and criminal safety violations." Sloane's flash went off, capturing the image of the agent handing a thick packet to a stunned Graham Whitmore. "This meeting it's postponed," Aiden yelled, finally understanding the world was ending. You can't be here. This is a private shareholder meeting." The lawyer from the SEC office, a sharp-looking woman, didn't even look at him. She addressed the moderator. "Sir, you can continue your vote. We are just serving notice." She then turned her flat, dead-eyed gaze on Aiden. "And you, sir, have no authority to postpone anything." My brother's face, a mask of privileged outrage, was priceless. The room was now a 3-ring circus. The government was here, the press was here, the old board was exposed, the new board, me, was in control. I had one final piece of business. "While the officers of the court do their work," I said, raising my voice over the din, "the restructuring committee has a final piece of immediate business." The chaos subsided, just slightly. A company is not its balance sheet, it's its people. And the key engineers, the plant managers, and the logistics leads at Iron Veil have been ignored for too long. I looked at the engineers in the back. "Your old contracts are void. Your new ones are here." A slide came up. It showed the key managers' names. "You are all being retained at a 15% pay increase, and effective today, you are all being granted stock options, not in Iron Veil, but in the new, merged entity of Northline Iron Veil. You will have a stake in the company you are helping to rebuild." It was a loyalty play. It was a talent retention play. And it was a signal to everyone that the war was over and the work was beginning. A man in a worn-out Iron Veil work jacket, who I recognized as a floor supervisor, stood up. He wasn't supposed to be here, but he had clearly come. We've been hearing a lot of talk today," he said, his voice rough. "A lot of numbers, a lot of lawyers. We've been telling Mr. Whitmore about these problems for years. He didn't listen. You," he looked at me, "you fixed it in a day. We don't follow the talkers. We follow the fixers. We're with you." That was it. I had the shareholders. I had the law. And now, I had the floor. "It's over, Graham," I said, my voice low, just for him. "Let it go." My father looked at the SEC agent, at his wife, at his son, at me. He looked at the suitcase. He was broken. "Sell it," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "What?" "Sell the company," he said, louder. He looked at Aiden. The overseas investor. That's what this is about. She drove the price down to..." He looked at Aiden, his eyes pleading. "The deal. Son, tell them. We'll sell it. We'll sell the whole thing to the foreign group. Get rid of it. Let everyone get their money and go." It was his last, pathetic move. He was trying to invoke the lie, the one Aiden had blabbed about at the party. He was trying to salvage some scrap of a payout. Aiden, seeing his father's plea, straightened up. "He's right. We have a standing offer from a strategic partner. It's an all-cash deal, and it's far more than her restructuring will ever pay." I smiled, a cold, thin smile. "Aiden, thank you for bringing that up," I said. "I've been wondering about that offer." I clicked my remote. A new slide appeared. It was the term sheet from Aiden's overseas investor, a document Victor had pulled from his desk. It was a shell company in the Cayman Islands,
offering to buy Iron Veil for pennies on the dollar.
This offer? I asked, as the shareholders read the laughably low number. This offer, which values the company at less than its debt? This isn't a rescue, Graham. This is a fire sale. This is a deal to let you and your board escape personal liability. This is a whitewash. I looked at the shareholders. This deal would pay you nothing. It is designed to pay me, the secured creditor, pennies on the dollar, and leave you with dust. I had them.
So, no, I said. We will not be taking that offer. Instead, we will be doing this. Another click. Under the terms of the debt restructuring, Riverton Capital, in partnership with the other junior creditors, is now activating the debt for equity conversion clause. Our combined $24 million of bad debt becomes... The slide changed to a pie chart. A massive blue wedge appeared. 51% of the newly capitalized Iron Veil North Line. As of this moment, we are the majority owners. This meeting is now a formality. You can't, Evelyn screamed, her voice cracking. That's a hostile takeover. We will sue you. We will sue you for... For what, Evelyn? Julian Pike said, stepping forward, his voice gentle. He was holding a single, crisp document. For saving the company you bankrupted? For protecting the shareholders you defrauded? For patching the software you ignored? He walked up to the dais and placed the document in front of her. This, he said, is a resignation letter. It tenders your immediate resignation from the board and as an employee, and it waives all future claims. It also includes a separation agreement. I will never sign that, she shrieked. Oh, I think you will, Julian said softly, because in exchange for your signature, Riverton Capital agrees to waive its right to pursue personal criminal and civil prosecution against you for your role in the cover-up. It's a deal. Evelyn, you give up this fantasy, and you get to stay out of a courtroom. He pointed to the SEC agents. An official courtroom. He pointed to the signature line. Victor Lane, as the CFO, has already co-signed on the financial release. It's your turn. Evelyn's face, a mask of rage, crumbled. It was Aiden who snapped. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the company. It was the humiliation. You, he screamed, not at Evelyn, but at me. You did this. You broke in. You broke... He was babbling. I know you. I knew it was you. That's why I sent... He stopped. His eyes went wide. He had said it, out loud. In the hallway, Sloane Archer's camera was pointed right at him. Her audio recorder was on. That's why you sent who? Aiden? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Sent who to smash my office? Sent who to leave a key on my desk? You, he pointed. You have no proof. I don't need it, I said. You just confessed to breaking and entering in front of 2 state agents and a reporter. As if on cue, the 2 police officers who had been standing by the door for the SEC, their faces bored, suddenly looked very interested. They looked at the SEC agent, who nodded. The 2 officers walked calmly, deliberately, up to the dais. Mr. Aiden Whitmore? One of them said, his voice polite. We'd like you to come with us. We have a few questions about an incident last night at the Northline Labs office. Aiden looked at his father. He looked at his mother. They were both staring, blank, into the void. He had no one. As they led him away, his hands not yet cuffed, but the threat hanging in the air, I turned my attention back to the only man left, Graham Whitmore. He was just staring at the suitcase on the podium. He hadn't moved. He was a statue, a monument to his own failure. I walked over to him, so only he could hear me. You were right, Graham, I whispered. Business is all about cutting your losses. You're very good at it. He looked up, his eyes empty, hollow. Today, I said, I helped you cut your biggest one. The meeting was over. The shareholders, looking dazed but palpably relieved, were filing out. The SEC agents were quietly packing their briefcases, having served their notices. The judge who had moderated was signing the final, official minutes. The old board was dissolved. Iron Veil Systems, as a legal and financial entity, was gone. In its place, the new articles of incorporation were signed. Iron Veil Northline, a private company, with Riverton Capital, me, as the majority owner and Tessa Whitmore as chief executive officer. My team, Julian, Maya, and the newly loyal Victor Lane, were already at a side table, fielding panicked, hopeful questions from the remaining engineers. Only one piece of old business remained. Evelyn had signed her resignation with a trembling, angry hand and had been swept away by her lawyers, her face a mask of silent fury. Aidan was gone, in the back of a police car, his few questions having turned into a formal arrest for the break-in. Only Graham was left. He was sitting alone in the front row, no longer on the dais, just a man in an expensive suit in a now empty room. I walked over to him. I was holding a single file folder. "Julian drew these up," I said. I placed the folder in his lap. "These are your termination papers." He didn't open it. "Termination?" His voice was a rasp. "You can't. I am a founder." "You're an employee," I said, my voice not cruel, just factual. "And I am firing you, for cause." I tapped the folder. "The willful violation of safety protocols, the deliberate misreporting of financials to a creditor, and the conspiracy to distribute counterfeit parts are all listed. You get no severance. You get no golden parachute. You just get to leave." He stared at the folder. He finally looked up at me, and his eyes were not angry. They were, for the first time, confused. He was searching for an answer, a reason. "I don't understand you," he whispered. That day, at your graduation, I thought it would make you stronger." "What?" The words were so absurd, so self-serving. I almost laughed. "Discipline," he said, the old words coming back to him. "Consequences. I thought if I pushed you out, you would have to learn to fight, to build your own." He gestured, helpless. "I was trying to make you. Don't you see? I made you." A cold, quiet rage, a final one, settled in my chest. He was trying to claim it, to claim my pain, my work, my victory, and rebrand it as his own secret lesson. He was trying to rewrite the past to make himself the hero. I said nothing. I turned, walked back to the podium, and I unlatched the old, charcoal gray suitcase. I opened the lid, facing him. "This," I said, "is what you left me with." I reached inside and pulled out the first item, the black, damp, wrinkled fabric of my graduation gown. "You left me with this." I reached in again and pulled out the commemorative program. "And this." "And then," I said, my voice dropping, "you left me with this." I pulled out the third item, the cream-colored envelope, the broken wax seal, and the documents inside. I held up the stock certificate, my mother's name, Eleanor Vance Whitmore, visible in the hall's light. "You didn't make me, Graham," I said. "You just left. You were so arrogant, so eager to cut your loss, that you couldn't even be bothered to look in the suitcase you were throwing away. You didn't even remember what was inside." I pulled out her letter, my mother's letter. "You thought you were teaching me a lesson about strength," I said, my voice shaking, not with sadness, but with power. "You were wrong. My mother already had." I unfolded the paper and I read the line, the one I had memorized. "Your strength is not his strength. Tessa," I read, my voice echoing in the silent room. "His is brittle, yours is forged. Strength is not being pushed out. Strength is knowing when to open the right door." I folded the letter. I put it back in the suitcase. "You didn't make me, Graham. You just gave my mother's legacy a reason to fight." He had no answer. The final narrative, his last attempt to control the story, was gone. I turned my back on him. I walked over to the group of engineers and floor managers who were waiting, lost by the wall. "All right," I said, my voice shifting. "Business. Everyone, listen up. The show's over.
The work starts. I looked at the floor supervisor who had spoken up for me. "What's your name?" "Dave," he said. "Dave," I said, "here's day one. I want a full, mandatory safety stand-down at every single workstation. Effective tomorrow. My new operations budget is live. I'm allocating $2 million for immediate equipment replacement. You and your team will create the priority list. Anything that looks like that junk from Block C is to be pulled, documented, and destroyed. No questions. Can you do that?" Dave, a man who had probably been ignored for 20 years, stood a little straighter. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Second, a one-time safety bonus is going to all floor-level employees and engineers, and a new, fully funded welfare program is being set up. The old I Sustain Slush Fund," I glanced at Victor, who winced, "is now the Employee Sustain Fund. It will be used for what it was supposed to be for, taking care of the people who do the work." My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Julian. The Northbridge infrastructure wire transfer had just hit the new corporate account. The recapitalization was complete. Another buzz, an email from the Safety Commission. "In light of your immediate, comprehensive, and transparent remediation plan, all further punitive fines are suspended, pending review. We welcome the new Ironvale North Line to the industry." It was done, all of it. I turned back. Graham was still sitting there. He was holding the termination folder. He had pulled a pen from his pocket. He was signing the last page. He stood, a man adrift. He looked at the dais, at the empty chairs. He looked at me, and then his eyes drifted, one last time, to the suitcase. His hand, the one that had signed the paper, reached out, trembling, and his fingers grazed the scuffed charcoal shell. A flicker of memory, a life he had, a choice he had made, a past he could not undo. He pulled his hand back as if burned. He turned, and with his shoulders slumped, his steps heavy, he walked toward the main exit. I walked with him. I didn't insult him. I didn't say another word. I just walked, 3 feet behind him. As he crossed the long floor of the exchange hall, he was the past, and I was escorting him to the door. He reached the heavy oak doors, the ones the SEC had entered through. He paused. He didn't look back. He pushed the bar and stepped out into the hallway, and the door side closed. The thud of the latch final. I had closed the door that he had closed on me. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing. Then I turned around. The room was mine. I walked back to the dais. The nameplates had already been changed. Evelyn's was gone. Aiden's was gone. Graham's was gone. In the center, where he had sat, was a new, polished brass plate. Tessa Whitmore, CEO. I sat in the chair. It was just a chair. My phone buzzed again. A text message from Sloan Archer. "Sloan, story is filed. It's a monster. Just one last question. Off the record. For me, you had him, the counterfeit parts, the fraud. You could have destroyed him, sent him to jail. You could have forced a Chapter 7 and picked up the pieces for pennies. Why buy the company? Why save it?" I looked at her text. I thought of my mother's patent, of the engineers, of Dave the supervisor, of the company she had wanted to build. I texted back, "Tessa, because the thing that needed fixing wasn't the iron, it was the way people treated each other." A shadow fell over my desk. It was Maya. She was holding 2 cups of bad, lukewarm coffee from the lobby. She placed one in front of me. "Good speech, boss," she said. I took the cup. "Thanks, Maya." She took a sip of her own, grimaced, and looked around the empty hall. "So," she said, "what's next?" I looked at the 100-day plan I had just presented. I thought of the firmware patch, the recall, the new budget. "Next," I said, taking a sip of the awful coffee, "we do exactly what they refused to do. We get to work." I stood up. I took the suitcase from the podium. My mother's letter and the old gown and the program still inside. I closed the lid. I spun the new combination lock Maya had given me. I heard the click. I carried it out of the hall, past the stunned legal teams and into the main lobby of the Ironvale North Line building. The next day, I had the corporate art removed from the main display case in the lobby. I put the suitcase inside. It sat on a simple black plinth, under a single, soft light. There was no plaque. There was no explanation. But every employee, every client, every person who walked into that building would see it. They would see the scuffed charcoal gray shell, the battered corners, and the luggage tag with my name on it. It was not a trophy. It was a reminder of where we had been and of the cost of cutting the wrong losses. I stood in the lobby, looking at the case. The morning sun streamed in through the glass doors, and my own reflection was superimposed over the new, gold lettering being applied to the glass. Tessa Whitmore, Ironvale Northline. The past and the present fused into one. Thank you for listening, and be sure to comment where you're tuning in from so we can connect and share our thoughts. Subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and show your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.